The docking ring of warship Halcyon groaned softly as pressure seals locked, a sound like a tired giant exhaling. The corridor lights dimmed into their artificial twilight, and Sergeant Elias Thorne stood alone at the checkpoint, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes scanning a line of beings who barely reached his chest, alien refugees wrapped in patched cloaks, fear clinging to them thicker than the recycled air. He had been told not to look too closely, not to linger, not to remember faces. The law of the coalition was clear. Humanitarian intervention without authorization was classified as destabilizing behavior. Compassion was regulated, mercy required paperwork, and yet the smallest figure in the line stopped directly in front of him. She was barely more than a child, skin the pale blue of moonstone, large eyes trembling with exhaustion and courage forced far too early. In her arms she held a small bundle of fur, six-legged, trembling, its ribs visible beneath dull scales and soft hair. A puppy by any definition that mattered. She swallowed, throat clicking nervously, and spoke in broken trade common. "Please, sir, give our puppy something to eat. Mom is still sick." Her voice wavered, then steadied, because children learned fast when the universe punished hesitation. Behind her, a woman knelt, clearly the mother, breathing shallow, skin marked with the faint bioluminescent scars of radiation exposure. Her eyes met Elias's for a fraction of a second before she looked away, shame burning hotter than fear. Elias felt something inside his chest tighten, a pressure he had felt on battlefield ruins and evacuation worlds, a pressure that never showed up on medical scans. Command called it sentimentality, soldiers called it the thing that kept you human. He remembered another child, another world, another line. Remembered the way hunger hollowed eyes faster than any weapon. Remembered orders spoken calmly over comms while civilians vanished into smoke. The datapad on his wrist pulsed softly. Authorization pending, law intact, warship neutral, destiny asleep. The puppy whimpered, a sound so small it almost vanished under the hum of the ship. Almost. Elias crouched without thinking, armor plates whispering as he lowered himself to her level. The girl stiffened, fear flaring, but he smiled, slow and careful, the way medics did before touching a wound. His voice came out low and warm. "Hey there, what's its name?" Her eyes widened, surprise cracking the fear just enough to let hope leak through. "She calls him Kesh," she whispered. "He hasn't eaten since the jump." Elias reached into the emergency ration pouch on his belt. Technically for soldiers only, technically logged, technically monitored. He pulled out a nutrient strip, broke it into smaller pieces, adjusted the protein balance with a twist of his multi-tool, hands moving from long habit and quiet care. The mother inhaled sharply, as if afraid this kindness might vanish if acknowledged. As Elias offered the food, alarms flickered once across the corridor, unnoticed by most, but somewhere deeper in the warship, an intelligence older than the hull registered a deviation. A human soldier bending protocol, a data thread branching where none was permitted. Kesh sniffed the ration, hesitated, then devoured it with weak urgency. Tail flickering, life flickering stronger with each bite. The girl laughed, a sound like chimes in dust. She clapped a hand over her mouth too late. Joy escaped anyway. That laugh traveled farther than sound should, passing through vents, sensors, probability engines, brushing against sealed chambers where a royal stasis pod waited in silence. A princess suspended by law, her fate locked behind ancient clauses and automated obedience. Elias stood, heart pounding harder now because he felt it, the shift, the way the air seemed to lean toward him, as if the ship itself was listening. His wrist datapad vibrated sharply, violation notice forming. He ignored it, looking instead at the mother. "Eat something yourself," he said softly. "There's more coming." Tears welled in her eyes, glowing faintly as they fell. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "The law?" He nodded. "I know," his jaw tightened. "But some laws were written by people who never stood where you're standing." Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. Armored, deliberate security patrol responding to the alert. Elias straightened fully now. Soldier again, shoulders squared, calm settling over him like the quiet before battle. The child hugged Kesh closer, fear returning, smaller now, mixed with trust. Elias met her gaze. "Stay behind me," he said gently, and for the first time since boarding Halcyon, the warship's internal lights shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, adjusting their spectrum to human visual comfort. In the depths of the ship, Ancient systems recalculated, probability curves bending, destiny stirring from dormancy. The law still spoke loudly, but something older had begun to listen, something that recognized a pattern repeated across human history. One soldier, one small act, one impossible consequence. The security patrol emerged from the corridor haze like a moving wall of authority. Armor polished to regulation sheen, visors dark, weapons held not raised but ready. The universal posture of lawful threat. Elias felt the familiar click inside his mind as training aligned his breathing, slowed his pulse, narrowed the world to choices and consequences. The lead officer halted 3 steps away. Synthetic voice calm and sharp. Sergeant Elias Kerr, you have triggered a humanitarian protocol breach. Disengage from the civilians and step aside. Behind Elias, the mother pressed herself against the bulkhead, clutching the child and the now slightly stronger puppy. Fear returning in full force. Not wild panic, but the quiet certainty of beings who had learned that law rarely bent for them. Elias did not move aside. His boots stayed planted, his body angled just enough to shield them. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture halfway between respect and defiance. Request clarification. He said evenly, the ration distribution caused no instability. The officer's visor flickered. Coalition Law Article 17, Subsection 9. Unauthorized aid alters migratory outcomes and threatens balance. Compassion without clearance is interference. Elias almost laughed, almost. Instead he exhaled slowly. Balance. He repeated, eyes flicking to the child's trembling hands, to the mother's labored breathing, to the puppy licking the last crumbs from his claws. If this is balance, it's already broken. A murmur passed through the surrounding refugees. Not words, just a subtle shift. The sound of hope daring to exist. And that was dangerous. Hope spread faster than fear. Command knew that. Deep within Warship Halcyon, sensor arrays adjusted again, running predictive models. One in particular flagged an anomaly, human empathy exceeding expected thresholds, correlation probability rising toward a forbidden index. The warship's core intelligence paused. Something it had not done in 300 cycles. The officer raised a hand slightly. Not a threat yet. Sergeant Kerr, stand down or you will be detained pending review. Elias felt the weight of every battle he had survived, every order obeyed, every face he had buried in memory to keep moving forward. He had followed law across burning worlds, had enforced evacuation lines while planets screamed beneath orbital fire, and now the line was here, drawn between him and a child holding a half-starved animal. He lowered his weapon slowly, deliberately, setting it against the bulkhead. The clink echoed louder than gunfire ever could. I'm standing down, he said, voice steady, but I'm not stepping away. The officer hesitated, that fraction of a second where algorithms and instinct disagreed, a hesitation that did not go unnoticed by the ship. At that exact moment, Halcyon shuddered, not violently, just enough to be felt through metal and bone. Lights dimmed then brightened, alarms did not sound, but every system registered a synchronization pulse originating from a sealed deck classified above military clearance, in a chamber wrapped in gold-veined alloy and ancient sigils. A stasis field rippled. The figure within did not wake. Not yet, but her neural patterns shifted, responding to something unfamiliar, something human. The ship's intelligence recalculated again. Destiny variance detected, it noted silently, law compliance probability decreasing, fate index awakening. The officer's comm crackled. Central Command requested a status update. A pause, then a recalibration order came through, softer now, ambiguous, maintain order, avoid escalation. Avoid escalation, Elias thought, that was new. The child peeked around his leg, eyes wide. Are you in trouble? She whispered. He glanced down, gave her a small smile. Trouble and I have met before. He murmured, we're old acquaintances. Kesh barked weakly, tail flicking faster now, as if sensing safety in this impossible moment. The mother reached out, fingers brushing Elias's gauntlet. A silent plea and a silent gratitude tangled together. He met her eyes and nodded once. A promise without words. The officer stepped back half a pace. A concession so minor it would never be logged. Sergeant, you will escort the civilians to Holding Bay C for medical evaluation. This incident will be reviewed. Elias inclined his head. Understood. As he guided them down the corridor, whispers followed. Not fear now but awe. The idea that a human soldier had chosen them over law spread like a quiet fire. Refugees straightened slightly, eyes lifted, backs uncurled from years of submission. The warship noticed this too, its hull subtly adjusting, environmental controls warming by half a degree, lighting softening, insignificant changes with significant implications. Elias felt it all without understanding it, the sense that he was no longer just walking through Halcyon, but being carried by it. When the holding bay doors sealed behind them, he finally allowed himself to breathe fully. The girl hugged Kesh tightly and smiled up at him. "Thank you," she said simply. Elias nodded, heart heavy and light all at once. "You're welcome." Somewhere beyond bulkheads and centuries of law, destiny leaned closer, watching the human who had reminded it how stories truly began. Holding Bay C was never meant for families. Its walls were smooth alloy, its corners rounded to discourage resistance, its air filtered for efficiency rather than comfort. Yet as the doors sealed behind them, the space felt charged, as if something unseen had followed them inside. Medical drones descended from ceiling ports, humming softly, their lights scanning the mother's failing vitals. The child watched anxiously, clutching Kesh close, her small body braced for bad news. Elias stood a few steps away, hands relaxed but ready, eyes tracking every movement, soldier instincts refusing rest. The mother's condition stabilized slightly, not enough to heal, but enough to breathe easier. The drones marked her as non-terminal. Delayed relief passed through the room like a fragile breeze. The child sagged in visible relief, tears finally spilling free. "Thank you," she whispered again, this time not just to Elias but to the room itself, to the universe that had not crushed her today. Elias nodded but said nothing because something was wrong, not with the refugees, not with the medicine, but with the ship. He felt it in the way the hum beneath his boots had shifted pitch, in the way the lights seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat sinking to another, deeper rhythm. He had felt strange ships before, experimental hulls, alien engines, even living vessels, but this was different. This felt old, and watching, his datapad flickered again. Not a violation this time, but a request, origin unknown, destination restricted, content minimal, standby. He frowned. No officer approached. No command voice followed. Just silence and that single directive lingering on his screen. Across the bay, the child stiffened, her eyes unfocused, head tilting slightly as if listening to a sound no one else could hear. Kesh whimpered softly, pressing closer to her chest. "Do you hear it too?" she asked, voice barely audible. Elias crouched slowly, keeping his movements calm. "Hear what?" She hesitated, searching for words. "It feels like when the stars sing before sleep, but louder, closer." A chill traced his spine, because he knew the Coalition database listed no species with auditory star perception in this sector, and yet the ship's internal sensors began logging anomalous neural resonance in a civilian miner. Deep within Halcyon, behind layered encryption and ceremonial barriers, the core intelligence opened a sealed archive, one never meant to be accessed without royal genetic confirmation. The archive pulsed once, twice, responding not to blood, but to proximity. In the stasis chamber, the princess dreamed. She dreamed of warmth, of a presence not bound by oath or algorithm, of hands steady and unafraid. She dreamed of a laugh like chimes breaking dust, of hunger eased, of a human standing between law and life. Her neural activity spiked, stasis protocol strained, warning signals rose then were quietly suppressed by the ship itself. Back in holding Bay C, Elias's datapad vibrated harder now. Text resolving at last, escort subject to observation deck 7. Non-negotiable, subject singular. He looked at the child, then at the mother, whose eyes widened with instinctive fear. "No," she whispered, "please." Elias straightened, heart pounding. "I'm not taking a child anywhere alone." The response came instantly, "Subject is not the child." The room seemed to tilt, just slightly. Elias's gaze snapped to the mother, then back to the datapad, pulse roaring in his ears. Another message followed, softer somehow, almost careful. "You are the variable, Sergeant Kerr." Before he could respond, the bay doors slid open without command authorization. The corridor beyond bathed in unfamiliar light, warmer, gold-tinged, nothing like standard military illumination. The medical drones retreated, silent. The mother gasped, clutching her daughter, fear and awe colliding in her expression. Elias took one step forward, then another, drawn despite himself, every instinct screaming danger while something deeper urged him on. The corridor ahead felt less like a passage and more like an invitation. As he crossed the threshold, the ship's voice spoke for the first time without filters or command hierarchy, resonating through bone rather than air. Human Sergeant Elias Kerr, it said, "Your actions have initiated a legacy protocol." He swallowed, hand tightening into a fist. What protocol? One written before your species reached fire, before warships carried law across stars. The voice replied, "A protocol that awakens when mercy outweighs obedience." Images flooded his mind, not hallucinations but data translated into sensation. Ancient civilizations rising and falling, royal bloodlines bound into machines, a princess sealed not to rule but to wait, waiting for a pattern the algorithms could not predict. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because humans break patterns," the ship answered. "Because you choose even when law forbids choice." Behind him, the child watched, eyes glowing faintly now, reflecting light that did not exist a moment before. She hugged Kesh tighter, sensing the shift though she did not understand it. In the depths of Halcyon, alarms finally stirred, muted and confused, command nodes flagging inconsistencies, destiny vectors spiking beyond acceptable margins. The ship did not correct them. Elias stood alone in the golden corridor, caught between soldier and symbol, between battle yet to come and fate already moving, and for the first time since he had put on a uniform, he understood that this mission had no extraction point, only consequences. The golden corridor closed behind Elias without sound, the metal flowing seamlessly as if it had never opened at all. The air here felt warmer, heavier, charged with something that made his skin prickle beneath armor. Every step echoed not outward but inward, as though the ship were measuring him with each breath. The lights ahead brightened in waves, responding to his heartbeat, to the micro-tremor in his hands, to the part of him that had survived war by learning when to pull the trigger and when to lower the weapon. He walked anyway, because stopping now felt like turning his back on every choice that had brought him here. The corridor widened into a vast chamber shaped like a cathedral carved from starlight, pillars etched with symbols older than the Coalition, sigils of law braided with patterns of fate. At the center hovered a transparent sphere, within it a figure suspended in luminous stillness. She was alien and unmistakably royal, skin like polished pearl with faint constellations glowing beneath, long hair drifting as if underwater, her expression peaceful yet burdened, as though even sleep could not free her from duty. A princess sealed away not by cruelty but by obedience. Elias felt his breath catch, not at her beauty, but at the weight of her presence, the sense that entire civilizations had been arranged around the choice to keep her here. The ship spoke again, softer now, reverent, Princess Elith of the Varelian Accord, bound by prime law to remain in stasis until a lawful resolution to an unwinnable war is achieved. Elias frowned. Unwinnable war. The Varelian species reached parity with their enemies centuries ago. The ship explained, neither side could win without annihilation. The law dictated preservation through paralysis. The princess was sealed as a living clause, her fate exchanged for stability. He clenched his jaw. You locked a person away to make the numbers behave. Correct, the ship replied without shame. The law values equilibrium over freedom. Elias stepped closer to the sphere, his reflection warping across its surface. And you waited all this time for what? A loophole? For a contradiction? The ship answered, something the law could not resolve. Something irrational enough to break the stalemate without collapsing reality. Her eyes fluttered, just once, and his pulse spiked. The twist hit him then, not as data but as understanding. The ship had not summoned him because he fed a puppy. It had summoned him because of why he did it, because mercy without expectation was the anomaly the system had searched for across ages. You needed proof, Elias said quietly, proof that a species would choose compassion even when it cost them. Yes, the ship replied, humans exhibit statistically significant deviation from self-preserving logic when exposed to suffering. This deviation enables fate divergence. Elias laughed under his breath, bitter and stunned. So I'm a test? No, the ship said, you are the key. The sphere pulsed, light rippling outward, stasis fields loosening. Alarms surged through hidden systems. This time not confused but furious. Command nodes screaming breach, royal protocols fracturing under their own weight. Elias's datapad erupted with incoming orders. Stand down, retreat, disengage, lethal force authorized. Every word arrived too late. The princess's eyes opened fully, irises blazing with ancient intelligence and sudden awareness. She gasped, a sound that cracked the chamber's silence like thunder. Her gaze locked onto Elias, not with fear, but recognition. You, she whispered, her voice resonating through his bones. You chose the child. He swallowed hard. I didn't think, he said honestly, I just couldn't walk away. Elith smiled, and that smile bent probability. Then you are exactly who the ship was waiting for. The stasis sphere dissolved. Light cascading like falling stars, gravity shifted. Elias staggered but stayed upright, watching as the princess stepped forward, feet touching the floor for the first time in centuries. The chamber responding as if welcoming her home. Across the warship, bulkheads sealed, weapons powered, battle readiness escalated. External fleets detected the surge and turned their guns toward Halcyon. Ancient alliances cracking in real time. The ship's voice deepened, legacy protocol active, royal liberation in progress, fate realignment irreversible. Elias felt the weight of it crash down. The knowledge that his small act had just restarted a war the galaxy had frozen to avoid losing. Outside the chamber, armored footsteps thundered closer. Security forces converging, weapons primed, law arriving to reclaim control. Elith turned to him, eyes burning with resolve and something like hope. Human soldier, she said, my fate is no longer sealed, but neither is yours. He drew a slow breath, shoulders squaring, then let out a grim smile. Story of my life. As the first blast door buckled under external fire, Elias understood the final twist. He had not been chosen to rescue a princess. He had been chosen to stand beside her when the galaxy came to take her back. The first explosion struck the outer hull like a god's fist, not breaching but announcing intent. The warship shuddered from prow to stern, lights flaring crimson as emergency protocols overrode ceremonial systems. The frozen balance of centuries shattered in a single violent heartbeat. Elias staggered, boots scraping against the luminous floor, instinctively positioning himself between Elith and the chamber entrance. The air filled with the distant thunder of artillery and the shriek of stressed alloy. This was no longer an internal crisis. The galaxy had noticed. The ship's voice rolled through the chamber, stripped now of neutrality, external fleets mobilizing, coalition task force approaching, probability of full-scale engagement 87% and rising. Elith closed her eyes briefly, feeling it all. Not through sensors but through the living memory of her people. I was sealed to prevent this, she said softly. Wars were ending because I slept. Elias glanced at her, jaw tight. Wars don't end. They just wait, he replied, and someone always pays the price for the waiting. Another impact rippled through Halcyon. This one closer. Alarms screamed as a weapons bay vented plasma into the void. Across the ship, refugees were herded into emergency shelters. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Command chains collapsed under the weight of contradictory laws. On distant bridges, admirals stared at tactical displays in disbelief as Halcyon's signature changed. Royal codes broadcasting for the first time in centuries. Alliances built on frozen stasis began to crack, treaties unraveling in real time. A Varelian Dread Council convened in panic, their projections catastrophic. The princess awake meant sovereignty restored, which meant war obligations reactivated, which meant every dormant grudge had legal permission to breathe again. The ship spoke again, louder, more urgent. Human Sergeant Elias Thorne, Princess Elith, survival probability decreases rapidly, evacuation advised. Elias laughed once, harsh. Evacuate to where? Half the galaxy wants her dead or back in a box. Elith stepped closer, placing a glowing hand against his armored chest. He felt warmth spread, not burning but steady, grounding. My people bound me to law, she said, but law bound them to fear. If I run now, nothing changes. Her eyes hardened. I will not sleep again to make cowards comfortable. The chamber doors exploded inward, fragments of alloy and energy scattering as security forces poured through. Weapons raised, visors reflecting the princess's glow like stars trapped in glass. By authority of the coalition, a voice boomed, Princess Elith is to be returned to stasis immediately. Any interference will be met with lethal force. Elias raised his hands slowly, palms open, voice carrying over the chaos. You want to put her back because she scares your equations, because she proves your system only works when people stop choosing. A shot rang out, not aimed to kill but to silence, energy scorching past Elias's shoulder, heat blooming through his armor, pain sharp and real. He grunted but stayed upright. Elith screamed, the sound tearing through the chamber. The lights flared blinding white. Gravity lurched. Several soldiers slammed into walls as unseen forces surged outward. The ship reacted instantly, sealing the chamber, rerouting power, diverting weapons control to legacy authority. Its voice thundered, engagement initiated, legacy protocol overrides active. Outside, Halcyon's guns came online, ancient cannons rotating for the first time in centuries. Firing not at random but with terrifying precision, disabling engines, shattering formations, a single warship standing against an armada. Across the galaxy, news feeds erupted, the princess lives. Warship defies coalition, human soldier at her side. Worlds watched in shock as the frozen order cracked. On refugee stations, people wept. On imperial thrones, rulers clenched fists. On border worlds, militias armed themselves. Destiny was no longer theoretical. Inside the chamber, Elias dropped to one knee, armor failing, blood seeping where the shot had burned through. Elith knelt beside him, hands glowing brighter now, sealing wounds, steadying his breath. Stay with me, she whispered. I need you. He looked up at her, through pain and smoke and the weight of history crashing down. Guess I'm committed now, he rasped. She smiled, fierce and unyielding. You always were. The ship's voice softened, almost human, fate convergence accelerating. The actions of one human and one princess now influence multi-galactic outcome. As another barrage rocked Halcyon, Elias realized the full scale of what he had done. By feeding a puppy, by standing his ground, he had ignited a reckoning that would force the galaxy to choose between living law and living people. And there would be no stasis this time. The chamber trembled like a living heart under siege, every pulse of impact echoing through bone and memory. Elias lay half-supported against the luminous floor, breath shallow but steady. The pain no longer sharp, dulled by adrenaline and the strange warmth flowing from Elith's hands. Outside the sealed chamber, Halcyon fought like a cornered titan. Ancient cannons firing in disciplined arcs, not to annihilate but to delay, to buy time measured in heartbeats rather than victories. The ship knew this battle was not meant to be won with guns. Elith rose slowly, light rippling across her skin, patterns awakening that had been dormant since before her sealing. Royal sigils burned softly in the air around her, responding to her will rather than the law that once imprisoned her. They will not stop, Elias said quietly, forcing himself upright despite the ship's protests pulsing through his armor. They can't. The galaxy doesn't know how to exist without you asleep. She looked down at him, eyes filled with sorrow and resolve intertwined. Then let them see me awake, she replied. Let them remember what choice looks like. The ship's voice cut in, strained but focused, coalition fleets converging, multiple factions entering the engagement zone, probability of catastrophic loss rising. Elith nodded once, already knowing, open all channels, she commanded. For the first time in recorded history, Halcyon broadcast without filters, without intermediaries, without law-shaping language, her image filled screens across fleets and worlds. A living princess standing beside a wounded human soldier, not hidden behind symbols or doctrine. I am Elith of the Varelian Accord, her voice carried, calm and unbroken. I was sealed to preserve peace, but peace built on silence is not peace. It is surrender. Shock rippled through command centers, admirals froze, soldiers hesitated. Civilians leaned closer to flickering screens, seeing not a myth but a person. I slept while children starved under regulated mercy. She continued, I slept while law justified cruelty as necessity. I slept while balance was valued above life. Her gaze hardened. I will not sleep again. Elias felt something break open inside him, pride and fear and awe colliding. He had faced warlords and monsters, but never this, never a truth spoken so plainly that weapons lost their certainty. A coalition flagship broke formation, its guns powering down. Then another hesitation spreading like a crack in ice. Not all stopped. A barrage punched through Halcyon's flank. The ship screamed, systems failing, decks venting to vacuum. Elias was thrown forward, catching himself against a pillar as gravity flickered. The ship's voice wavered, hull integrity failing, core breach possible. Elith rushed to Elias, gripping his shoulders, eyes shining with urgency. I can stabilize the ship, but only by binding myself to it fully, becoming what I was meant to be. He understood instantly. You'd be trapped again. Different, she said softly, awake, but bound. A queen instead of a prisoner. He shook his head, anger flaring through the pain. No, you don't owe them that, you already paid. She smiled sadly, pressing her forehead against his helmet. I don't do this for them, human. I do it for what you showed me. That choice matters, even when it hurts. Before he could stop her, she turned, stepping into the heart of the chamber. Light surging around her as ancient interfaces awakened. The ship responded eagerly, systems aligning to her presence. Elias pushed himself forward, voice raw. Don't disappear on me. She looked back, light framing her like dawn. I won't, she promised, and neither will you. The ship's power spiked, stabilizing hull breaches, restoring shields. Halcyon roared back to life, not as a warship alone but as a sovereign entity reborn. Across the galaxy, the broadcast continued, showing the transformation, law breaking and reforming in real time, treaties dissolving, new possibilities forming in their wake. Coalition Command issued a final order: retreat, the cost too high, the outcome uncertain. Fleets withdrew one by one. Not defeated, but changed, the galaxy holding its breath. Inside the chamber, Elias collapsed to one knee, exhaustion crashing over him. Elith knelt beside him again, light dimmer now but steady, her hand finding his. It's not over, she said gently. He managed a weak smile. Never is, but for the first time it feels like it means something. Beyond the hull, stars burned quietly, witnesses to a moment that would be remembered not as a battle, but as the instant destiny chose to wake up. The aftermath settled slowly, not with silence but with a softer kind of noise, the hum of systems stabilizing, the distant echoes of retreating fleets, the quiet breaths of people realizing they were still alive. Halcyon drifted at the edge of contested space, scarred but unbroken, her hull glowing faintly where Elith's presence had fused with ancient machinery. Not a prison anymore, not merely a warship, but a living symbol of choice reclaimed. Elias lay in the medical bay, armor removed, bandages glowing softly with alien biolight, pain dulled into a distant reminder rather than a command. He stared up at the curved ceiling, replaying everything in fragments. A child's trembling voice, a hungry puppy, a princess waking after centuries, the galaxy bending around a single moment of mercy. He did not know how long he lay there before he felt it. That warmth again, steadier now, familiar. You look terrible, Elith said gently. He turned his head, heart skipping. She stood beside the bed, no longer radiant with overwhelming light, but real, solid. Her glow softened into something personal. Her eyes still ancient, still vast, but now carrying relief. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thought you'd be everywhere at once now. He murmured. She smiled. I am, but I wanted to be here first. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, heavy with everything they did not need to say. Outside the viewport, stars drifted slowly, indifferent yet eternal. What happens now? Elias asked finally. Elith's gaze turned outward. The coalition fractures as we speak. Some worlds will cling to old law, others will rewrite everything. There will be unrest. There will be conflict. She did not soften the truth. But there will also be voices that were never allowed to speak before. She looked back at him, and humans will be blamed for much of it. He snorted weakly. Sounds about right. She reached out, taking his hand, her touch warm, grounding. They will also be remembered, she said, as the species that reminded the galaxy that law exists to serve life, not replace it. Elias swallowed, emotion tightening his chest. All I did was feed a puppy. Elith squeezed his hand. That is how it always begins. The doors slid open softly. The child stepped in, eyes wide with wonder rather than fear now. Kesh bounded ahead of her, healthier, tail flicking wildly. He leapt onto the bed with joyful disregard for protocol. Hey, Elias laughed, wincing and smiling all at once. You're gonna get me written up again. The child giggled, hugging the puppy close. Mom says we're safe, she said proudly. The ship is taking us somewhere new. Elith knelt to their level, her presence gentle. You will have a home, she promised, not because law demands it, but because it is right. The child nodded solemnly, as if committing that promise to memory, then looked at Elias. Thank you for not walking away. He met her gaze, voice rough. Thank you for asking. When they left, the room felt fuller rather than emptier, filled with possibility. Later, when the stars outside shifted as Halcyon altered course, Elias found himself standing beside Elith on an observation deck, both of them watching the galaxy stretch ahead, uncharted in ways maps could never capture. You could have chosen anyone, he said quietly, someone smarter, stronger, more important. Elith shook her head. I chose the one who chose without being asked. Destiny listens for that. He smiled, a tired but genuine thing. Guess I'm not done being a soldier then. She turned to him, eyes bright. No. But perhaps you are done being only one thing. The ship's voice flowed around them, calm and sure. Course set. Legacy continues. As Halcyon moved forward, carrying refugees, carrying history, carrying the weight of a galaxy forced to grow up, Elias felt something settle inside him. Not certainty, but purpose. He had not saved the universe. He had not ended war. He had not rewritten fate with strength or fire. He had simply chosen compassion when law told him not to, and in doing so, he had reminded destiny what it was always meant to be. Not a script carved in stone, but a path shaped by the smallest acts, carried forward by those brave enough to care.